would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Monday edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Once again, trying to share with all of you the latest and greatest real estate news and opinion, and trying to see if we can't figure out what's coming down the road, or at least learn from the things we take a look at to figure out if we can't come up with strategies to help us find our way down the path of real estate success. Welcome to it. If you'd like to get in contact with me, the best way to do that is to head over to the website, therebelbroker.com. Click on the contacts link in the menu bar, and that'll allow you to send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. I hope y'all had a great weekend. Mine was very busy, not in a, well, kind of real estate, I guess. My personal stuff. I wasn't out there bipping and bopping and checking out properties. And an amazing number of properties came on the market on Sunday, which kind of blew me away. We are heading into that time of year. April and May tend to be when we start to see things hitting. As I mentioned before, after doing some analysis of my local area, May is the sweet spot, which is when I am planning to be on the market. We'll have to see. Things are getting a little tight. I'm still shooting for the first week of May for the kitchen to be done. Hopefully, as I mentioned before, I have some complications with my contractor. I have one job being done by one group and the rest of the jobs being done by my in-law contractor. And unfortunately, he's having a surgery, which I believe he's going in for tomorrow. Good luck, my friend. I hope everything goes well. But I didn't want to just be a jerk. So we're going to go ahead and wait for him to feel better to get in here and get the work done. And the biggest thing I've got on the slate for him to do is the master bathroom. He's great with tile. He did a great job on the some other work I had him do in my bathroom. So I'm really looking. He did a great job on the tile in my entry. So I'm really looking forward to him jumping in and getting that stuff done. And he's got a pretty good track record of getting stuff done pretty quickly. So I'm figuring 2 to 3 weeks for him to get back on his feet. Figuring maybe the end of April, he can get over here and get to work. And I'm guessing 2 to 3 weeks for him to be able to finish up the stuff on the list I'm hoping he can do for me. So timing is working out. I would have loved a little bit more margin, but everything's fine. So moving forward. Interesting thing this weekend. Now, in addition to being sick as a dog for part of this weekend, again, because of my disease-ridden children, you learn these lessons, and I learn them, and they're lessons that work for me because of the way I am. But I got to imagine there's some number of you. I'm sure there are tons of you out there who are so organized and so together that what I'm about to say is not helpful at all. So I guess you can zone out for a second. But I am not. I am, well, you know what? If we're being totally honest, I unfortunately do frequently leave my clothes on the floor, very near the closet. I apologize to the world for that. And I'm a pack rat. There's some part of me that feels a revulsion to ever toss in a book. And I'll tell you, I've had to push through that feeling over the last few weeks as I have gotten rid of literally decades worth of paperbacks. I've drew the line at hardbacks. With the small exception that I just give, no one wants paperbacks out in the world, right? So if you call, except for recycling, the recycling guys will take the paperbacks. If you want to give away hardbacks, even that's hard. I tried to give these away to like libraries and schools. No one wants anything fiction really, unless it's classics. So I ended up giving them to a bookstore, actually 2 different bookstores in San Jose that's what they specialize in. I think I got a couple of cents per book, and some of even those they didn't want. So even some of those hardbacks ended up getting recycled. And I'll tell you, it's time consuming to be conscientious as opposed to just taking everything and dumping it into the trash and trying to do recycling. It's felt good to do it, but man, it takes a lot of extra effort. So keep that in mind if you're struggling with the same thing. And let me suggest something else. I'm one of those people that things that keep me motivated, things that keep me on task, are when I can have very measurable or noticeable results. And up until this last weekend, I was sort of just going through the house and randomly packing stuff that clearly needed to be packed. So, tons of books in my bedroom, tons of books in the living room, tons of books downstairs. It was focusing on the books first. And trying to cut that collection down, where I'm literally one of those people where if you added it up, I probably have thousands of books. And I think I've cut that down substantially, going through and just getting and all the obvious stuff, anything. And my rule is when I'm preparing a home to be sold, and something I tell my clients when I'm advising them on how to prepare to get their home sold, if you have anything that you have not looked at in 6 months, get it out. It should go. And your knickknacks and all the other things, those should all go too. While you may enjoy them, remember, we live in our house differently than we sell our house. So for me, it's been knickknacks, it's been photos, it's been just random stuff. And since we have 3 kids in the house, it's also been, 6 years of elementary school, 2 years of middle school, and 3 and 4 years of high school's worth of homework that has, for whatever reason, just been kept. And that has all gone into recycling, with the exception of a few wonderful little art things that the kids have done over the years. But having 20 boxes of stuff or of kids' things just doesn't make sense. So anyway, I'm kind of going off in the weeds. I apologize. But the point is, I hit the big stuff first. And I'm debating whether that was the smart way to start, but I tell you, you could sure see the difference in the house once I did that. Now, once you start getting down and into it, my suggestion is you start at one end of the house and go room by room and make each room perfect. And by room, I think I should make that even more specific. Each space. So, for instance, this weekend I started in my closet in my master bedroom, and anything that wasn't that I didn't think made that little. Well, it's not a little closet. My walk-in closet, wonderful looking, was out. So I got rid of 50% of the clothes. More than 50% of the clothes. So anything that I wasn't planning on wearing over the next 3 to 6 months, it's gone. It got packed and put into storage. Any random boxes, any random stuff that doesn't really need to be in a closet. Does my scuba diving stuff need to be in my master bedroom closet? No. There are no large bodies of water in my master bedroom closet or in my master bedroom. So those suckers, they get packed and put into storage unless I plan to go scuba diving sometime in the next 3 to 6 months. Or at the very least, go into the garage where they probably should have been anyway. So, and what you want to do is just, you want to put the best foot forward on every space. So believe it or not, at once I started to one end of my master bedroom closet and worked to the other end, which took nearly a freaking day. It is now perfect. It is cleaned. It is ready to be painted. I am going to put a brighter light bulb in there, and it will be perfect. Right. Next step, the master bedroom. Anything random, any extra pieces of furniture. 2 bookcases are going to leave the master bedroom. A little armoire that I made is going to leave the master bedroom, and it's going to get painted. So every miscellaneous thing is just out. The next step will be my son's rooms, which will be a ridiculously annoying process, but you get where I'm going. Once I have done the master bedroom closet, I can see that that's done, right? I'm not cherry picking different parts all over the house, and actually in a lot of cases creating a mess on my path towards getting rid of this stuff. So by doing this thing where I have these measurable milestones, master bedroom closet, done. Master bedroom, done. Morgan's room, done. Connor's room, done, right? Now, granted, I'm going to have to beat my children with a stick to make sure that they live in the house as we're trying to sell it, not as they live in it. And let me tell you, with a couple of my sons, it's like having hogs rolling around in the mud in their bedroom. So That will be a tough one. But I think that is what is going to give you the most satisfaction through this process by starting at one end. And then when you're done, your house is ready to be shown. It is ready to go. And my goal is to have all of this stuff done before the work is completed a month from now. So I feel pretty good about that. My next step is to acquire the paint needed in a couple of areas. I'm just going to go with classic white. In some other larger areas where it would be a huge pain in the butt to have to paint up to the cathedral ceiling, I'm going to stick with the existing color, because all you need to do is make sure you've dusted and swiped away any cobwebs or anything that might be up there. You don't have to do that because nothing's gotten up there to mark or screw up that paint. So that way you can just paint up to a certain point without having to repaint every single surface, right? Again, 3 kids in the house whose primary role in life seems to be to rub their hands on the wall as they walk up the stairs and as they walk down the hall. So, of course, there is all of that accumulated kid goo that gets onto all these various surfaces. So there you go. Again, those are all things that I think once everything is said and done, you're able to put it into bite-sized chunks where you feel like you're really making headway with each area that you conquer. All right. So I just wanted to share that. It was kind of a revelation for me once I sat back and looked at my master closet. I felt, yeah, hey, that's a good thing. I did a good thing today. Of course, the master bedroom's now the primary thing. And in fact, it's not quite done. As I'm sure you guys have guessed, I usually record my shows the day before you listen to them. So today is Sunday for me. Still going to plan on finishing more with the master bedroom today, but making good headway. So, and I'm sure I'll feel good once that room's done. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to put on the hit parade today is dealing with multiple offer situations when you're a buyer. And I think this is information that's good for anyone who's either a first-time buyer, second-time buyer, 10th-time buyer, investor. It doesn't matter. There are strategies out there that you're going to want to at least be aware of and consider as you're trying to put together an offer that's going to give you the best possible level of success. And some of this stuff is going to be pretty darn effective. There are absolutely things that are still true today that have been true in the past, relating to things that tend to be a little bit more cyclical. There are strategies that sometimes work and sometimes don't, depending on what's going on in the markets in general. And we're going to cover all of those. So by the time we're done, you should have a pretty good set of tools in your chest to work through a situation where you are a buyer in a market where you're tending to have to compete with other buyers. And boy, is nowhere more true than where I am that tends to be the case. I'm seeing multiple offers on an awful lot of stuff. I did mention I saw a ton of listings come onto the market in Gilroy specifically on Sunday, to the point where it took me a good 25 minutes just to go through the list. I suppose I could pull it up, but it was at least a dozen new listings in one day. So when I look at my map of all the currently available listings that meet my search criteria, it's an awful lot of homes. So I'm going to be interested in seeing if we continue to see this multiple offer scenario situation. And that's something else to be aware of as we move into our discussion of how to put together your offer on a property to give you the best possible chance of succeeding. Now, the inspiration for this particular discussion comes from an article from the USA Today Network, Real Estate, How to Win Over Multiple Offers. I found their article to be kind of simplistic, but of course, as always, whenever we come up with a topic where I can offer you a little bit of more street reality or ground truth relating to a topic, I like to lather that on thickly, and we will do that. So we're going to take a quick break right here, but don't go away. Right after this break, we will be discussing how to get your offer accepted. So don't go away. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. Well, here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get your offer accepted. Before we jump into that, though, let me remind everyone that the best way to join the Rebel Underground, which is a exclusive group of folks who've decided to subscribe to getting insider info, exclusive videos and material, the best way to join is to text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. And if you don't want to do that, for whatever reason you don't want to text, head on over to therebelbroker.com, check out the show notes for any show, and you'll see a button right there in the middle of the show notes that gives you an option to join the Rebel Underground. Okay, and of course, as I mentioned frequently over the last couple of weeks, there is a great opportunity for you to win yourself a $50 Amazon gift card. At the same time, you're also helping to support the show. How do you do it? You head over to therebelbroker.com, scroll to the top of the page, click the big red button that says take the survey to support the show. Use the same email address both times you're asked, answer a few kind of generic demographic style questions. And once you're done, you will be in the running for that $50 Amazon gift card, which helps you. And you will have helped me by adding some a little bit more demographic information about the type of folks who listen to the show. And that helps me greatly. So thank you very much. And congratulations to the folks who've won, I think, $250 or $300 so far in total. And good luck to those of you who are about to join that list, hopefully, right? All right. And we'll probably do the drawing 5 p.m. this Friday Pacific time. So just make sure to register for the Rebel. Just make sure to go ahead and click that red button and answer those questions sometime before 5 o'clock p.m. Friday Pacific time, and you'll be in the drawing. So I'll go ahead and do it next weekend. All right, folks. So as I mentioned, there will be there's an article that kind of inspired me to start on this topic today. And I'll go ahead and include a link to that if you'd like to check it out. And it's kind of basic. You know, it covers some fundamental stuff, but there's more, and we'll go ahead and lay that on. But I guess what we'll do is start with their suggestions. Having a flexible schedule. Now, they don't lay this out as a list, so you kind of have to tease it out from the text. But one of the first things they suggest is having a flexible schedule. Now, this would take into account the entire process, right? In terms of having a flexible schedule on how long you want escrow to be, in terms of having a flexible schedule on when escrow closes, in terms of having a flexible schedule of potentially allowing the seller to stay in the home after close of escrow. And you're not doing that for free. They're typically paying you a rent that's equal to your holding costs or more of the property. But if you have that flexibility built in, if you're a renter, now here, oftentimes what I suggest for my folks who are buying, who are currently renting, is to give yourself a minimum of 2 weeks overlap. That is great insurance in case escrows get pushed out or the date has to move, but it also gives you an ability to be flexible at the front end of the transaction so you can say, hey, whatever you guys need will help to facilitate an easy transition for you. That can be a huge benefit to buyers, particularly because there are so many sellers that are in that boat of being worried about what's going to happen on the end of the transaction for them, particularly if they're moving a long distance. They have to coordinate transcontinental moving statistics and all these other kinds of wonderful things. And really pointing that out, really making sure that they understand that you're willing to accommodate these things is great. Now, here is an additional tidbit on that. Have your real estate agent determine this stuff before you write the offer. Almost no one else is going to approach that listing agent and say, what would make this deal go absolutely best for your clients? You're not asking them what the seller will settle for. You're not asking for any sort of the stuff that a lot of agents will ask to try to figure out what the lowest ball number they can come up with is. What you want your agent to do to find out what are the biggest concerns with your clients. And you'll find that oftentimes, depending on the age of the folks doing this selling, it's different. You'll find folks that are tending to be more at retirement age have a different set of concerns than other folks. But regardless of that, just ask, what's their moving scenario like? Are they moving to another state? How much extra time might they need? If you give me this information up front, we will write our offer in a way that takes all of that stuff into account. The reason why you want to do that is oftentimes without having any specificity in your offer. I mean, you may say in a cover letter that you include with your offer, and anything like this, by the way, that's in a cover letter, I will also include in the language of the offer. In other words, let's say we are going to we're requesting an escrow of whatever number of days. And hopefully your agent has already communicated with the listing agent. How many days do your clients need to close escrow? Do they want 30 days? And of course, you need to mix that with your lender number, right? If you've talked to your lender and they're telling you, give us 45 days, well, you need to make it 45 days or more. If the seller wants 60 days, great, give them 60 days. If the seller wants 50 days, plus they want to stay in the house an extra 5 days for whatever reason, try to accommodate that. Now, remember, these are all tactics you're using to make your offer look best. If you're in a marketplace where homes are staying on the market forever and they're tending to sell below asking price, that's a clue to you that this isn't a multiple offer scenario, even if potentially the agent on the other side, the listing agent, tells you it is. I can't tell you the number of times I have had an agent tell me that it's a multiple offer scenario only to discover that it wasn't really. That I went in with an offer below asking price with great terms for my people because I had a hunch he was full of crap. Speaking of that, I have an update for you relating to real estate agents who've reached out to me via my Zillow thing. We'll cover that at the end. In any event, so being able to figure that out is important as well. And usually from your market, you can tell. And if this is an extremely awesome property at an awesome price, in a market like that, that could often end up with multiple offers. So just keep all that in mind. Your agent should be able to calibrate you to that. Okay. And so you may end up writing a 40 or 50 day close of escrow, which is just a number you enter on the front page if you're in California. But in the addendum, I will actually write in there stuff like while the buyer has stipulated 40 days or 45 days for close of escrow, seller to be aware that buyer is willing to extend close of escrow by as much as X number of days to accommodate needs of the seller. Point 2 might be, while contract is written for possession of property to take place at close of escrow, if seller requires a rent back, buyer will accommodate at cost of holding, whatever. Because that way you're legally entering it into the document that the seller is going to see. I go to a lot of trouble to write a cover letter that explains all the thoughts that went into an offer that I put together. And I also like to include a big push for my buyers. I'll usually include a photograph of them. It's awesome if they've got kids, if they're veterans. I like to introduce my buyers to the sellers because I want to try to appeal to them on an emotional level. And I'm not going to be shy about that. I'm going to take every advantage I can for my clients. So make sure that it also, but you are at the mercy of the listing agent as to whether or not that cover letter gets included because it's not part of the legal document, right? So that listing agent may not hand off the cover letter. So I always like to, for the stuff that's actual potential term changers on the contract, I like to include those in the contract just so that the seller is absolutely aware of that. Okay. The next on their list, which is ridiculously obvious, we've talked about this a million times, cash is king. Absolutely, cash is considered king. The more you can put down, the better. If you can't come in with all cash, if you're coming in with 20%, which is fine. I mean, that's if you're doing a conventional loan, that's typically what you want to go with, right? But if you're coming in with 30%, 40%, 50%, that gives you an alternative that you might want to consider. For instance, if it's a market that is currently on the rise and there are multiple offers happening for everything, one option you're going to want to look at is waiving the appraisal contingency. Now, you'd want to figure out what the realistic numbers are. You don't want to put yourself out there on a limb. But what you would want to do is say, you know what? Even if the appraisal does not come in, and the reason why this is a big one is because appraisals have been a problem over the last year. They're a little bit less so now in my market, but it really even some submarkets are still having problems in my area. But if you come in with no appraisal contingency, there's a chance you will get accepted where someone who came in with a higher actual purchase price gets pushed aside while you get embraced. The reason for that is because of the number of times that an appraisal is what skewers a transaction. So if that's something you can manage, if you're coming in with a lot of cash and enough cash so that if it didn't appraise, you'd be making up the difference, right? As long as there's an 80-20 ratio going on between with what you're borrowing and what you're putting down, minimum, then you're fine. So, and you're putting down the same amount of money anyway. And if you're not committing those resources and you're trying to keep it just at 20%, but you've got enough resources that you could come up with another 10%, leverage that. Use that to your advantage. Because the odds are that you're going to put yourself in a much better position than a lot of other folks if you're able to waive that appraisal contingency. Now, that really covers what this article had to offer on suggestions on how to get your offer accepted over others. Not horribly insightful, nothing horribly earth-shattering. Now, I've already offered up an awful lot that already makes your offer better, but let's try to give you just a little bit more. Now, one other area to pay attention to are the things that you can't really create a template for. And a lot of that's going to have to do with what's going on in the local marketplace, and being aware of problems that are killing the deals in your area. You're going to want to talk to your agent about that. What are the top items that are preventing things from closing? Now, the most common things tend to be, if we're talking just averages across the country, and we've actually done shows on this in the past, appraisals and financing. Those tend to be the number one things. However, in different areas, there could be things that are challenging to the marketplace that tend to be very local. By being aware of those, you can write your offer in a way that minimizes the probability that those things will be a problem. And if the listing agent who's receiving the offer is aware of it, and they should be, because your agent should point it out, the buying agent should point it out in the offer and in a cover letter, just so that they know that this thing that's happening in this local market isn't going to affect this transaction because you've written the offer in a way that minimizes it, or you've taken it on yourself to worry about that. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that process of your agent talking with the seller's agent. Now, we already talked about timing related questions, right? But there are other things. There could be other things that are very important to that seller that other folks won't be aware of unless they ask the seller. And it could be anything. To give you an example, I had a client a couple of years back who owned a property that had a horse on it, and they didn't know what to do with the horse. They couldn't get the horse sold. So my buyers decided to include the horse in the deal. They didn't pay any more money, but they included the horse in the deal, and then they simply sold the horse after the deal. But it took the stress off of the sellers to find a buyer. Do I think that sealed the deal? I don't know. There were several other things that were moderately creative that were involved with that deal, but it had relieved the stress of them having to find something to do with that horse. Look for those things. Look for the things that might be causing stress on the part of the seller that you can reduce, that you can eliminate from the equation. The other things that you'll want to ask about anything. You can't always get a really good answer from the listing agent. A lot of time the listing agent is as oblivious as anyone in the transaction. They're simply pushing the papers. So keep an idea in your head of what you're seeing in the home when you go through it. You may actually get a clue on the challenges that the seller is facing based on what you see in the property. That could give you some sort of insight into that. And if you ever get an opportunity to speak with the seller directly, whether you're doing a walkthrough or which would usually indicate you've already had the offer accepted. But if you're getting a chance where you're in the home at the same time they are, maybe you're viewing the home, and if you ever get a chance to chat with them, ask them those kinds of questions. It's great, of course, to ask the usual questions. What do you like most about the neighborhood? Those types of things. You know, when you go out, what are the best restaurants? Where do you go to shop for your groceries? Those types of things. You might also ask What are your biggest stressors for you right now in terms of what you're facing with getting your home sold? And try to be the person who offers that complete solution. Remember, we've talked about what sellers should be worried about in general terms. You know, their agent should be getting them the best price at the best terms in the shortest period of time. And those terms can be a very interesting variable in an equation, particularly if you're dealing with stuff that goes above and beyond the normal stuff that just allocates who pays for what. Other examples, I had a buyer who had a brother-in-law who was a contractor. So we worked out, and there was some work that needed to be done on the home, and my folks were willing to work out a deal for getting that done where they would accept the issue, that the problem that was there, and they only wanted a credit that was 50% of what it would take to remediate it. Now, granted, if you're dealing with the offer phase, it's a whole different process than if you're already in the transaction and you find a problem. That would be listed under saving your escrow. But if you know that there's problems ahead of time, you might be, and you know that, for instance, you can get it fixed, it can cost you nearly nothing. If it's already been disclosed to you, maybe you don't make that something that impacts your offer price. You need to, but again, when you do all of these things, they should be called out in the addendum. The addendum is my magic bullet for an awful lot of stuff, where I make sure that the seller notices that my folks are going to the extra step to address stressful elements of the transaction that might be concerning them. All right. So in more general terms, making your offer as slick and straightforward as possible is often a great way to go. Simply because complications often equal weird stuff. So for instance, we mentioned not having an appraisal contingency. If you are comfortable doing that, if you know you're coming in with enough cash to make that happen and make it work, even if the house doesn't appraise, absolutely do that. We already talked about why that's important, but it would also be true of other contingencies that are normally part of the transaction. If you're not worried about your loan, don't make a loan contingency. Don't require that a loan be part of it, but also be aware of the downside. If your loan doesn't come through, you lose your earnest money. In California, that's up to 3% of the purchase price. So even if you put down more than 3% of the purchase price, you'll only lose 3% at max, and only. I mean, that can be an awful lot of money, and 3% of a home is an awful lot of money to lose out of your capital. But again, if you are in that unique situation where you have absolute certainty on your part that it's going to happen, then it would be worth it to you to not have that as a contingency, because having that not as a contingency is going to dazzle a seller. Other things that make it clean: don't make it contingent on you selling another property. Don't make it don't add things to it that give you an out other than what is already in there standard. And of course, as we mentioned, even try to waive off those standard things like the appraisal contingency and the loan contingency if you're 100% sure those things aren't going to be a problem, or you've got the financial resources to make it not a problem. All right, next. Don't ask for personal property. I often find folks coming in trying to buy a home. They're looking to spend $500,000, and for whatever reason, they're hot for that $150 chandelier, and they want to include that as something to leave in the house. Don't. Particularly if it was mentioned in the listing as something that is not staying in the home. Other things, anything not listed in the listing as staying, don't ask for it. Unless you've asked for it ahead of time. For instance, and remember, this also comes down to agents who just don't write their listings very well. If the seller's intent is to leave the fridge, leave the washer and dryer, and leave all of that extra stuff, leave that freezer that's in the garage, there's a pretty good chance the agent may not communicate that effectively in the listing. So I always like to ask, what are the things that the seller is expecting to leave in the home that they don't want to take with them? So that way you can have a very clean offer that meets the expectations of the seller right off the bat. Now, of course, every agent is going to push you to do this. So I hate to bring it up because there's going to be a lot of momentum behind you doing this, and that is to offer above asking price. When I do, and there are times when that is it, when that is the strategy that you need to use. depending on how great you've been able to push through with other things that make the offer more desirable. You're going to oftentimes find yourself in a situation, though, where the offer price that's been put out on a property was intentionally low, where they were never intending to sell the home for that amount of money. I have seen tons of homes that have sold where the price that it was listed for, the listing agent and the seller were absolutely 100% sure there was no way on God's green earth that that home was going to sell at that price. It was going to sell for quite a bit more. The whole point was to get people coming in the door to make multiple offers. Now, the problem with that is if you're someone who's been searching with your absolute top end in what your search is, and this home is just below your top end and you can't go any higher, well, then you may be out of luck. Do you not make an offer? No, you do absolutely make an offer because, one, you never know what's going to happen. And it doesn't cost you anything to make an offer. You have to write a check that doesn't get deposited till at least 3 days or 1 to 3 days after the offer is accepted. So there's no real risk in terms of just taking that 30 minutes to put that offer together. So I would absolutely still write it up. But if you find yourself in a situation where you're making an offer on a home and you still have a lot more headroom left, and your agent can show you, yeah, you know what, this home is underpriced. It's probably going to go for $40,000 more than list price. Then do that. Consider that as an option, but make your agent prove it. Don't do it simply because your agent says so or because the listing agent says so. Do it because they've said it and they've backed it up with data. You should always insist on when your agent's telling you to pony up more bucks, you should absolutely be expecting data to back that up. Another, in terms of money, putting down a really strong earnest money deposit. Now, as I mentioned before, in the state of California, and it may be different in your state, you don't have more than 3% at risk of going away. So I always suggest that you at least put 3% down as earnest money, simply because you are maxing out the amount of money that can be put at risk right up front. I point that out in the contract. I point that out in the cover letter just to show how dedicated my buyer is to the transaction. If my buyer has the ability to put more earnest money deposit cash down than the 3%, I absolutely point that out as well, just to show, because that will probably be more than most other folks do, since most other folks, their agents will tell them to limit it to 3%. By putting in, regardless of whether or not the seller gets explained to them that the amount that's actually at risk for you is just limited to that 3%, the fact that you've committed more liquid dollars to the transaction up front is going to have a better psychological effect than other folks' offers. So if you can do it, I suggest you do it. It shows an absolute level of dedication on your part, and I think it gives you a slightly better negotiating position. As we mentioned before, anything you can waive, you should waive, particularly the mainstream stuff, appraisal and loan and whatever else. If you walk in there with all contingencies released, that's pretty amazing too. But in order to do that, you'd have to walk in there not worrying about your appraisal, not worrying about your loan, and not worrying about your inspections. So if you have any thoughts that there's going to be anything funky in the inspections that are going to cough up more money things that need to happen, you need to be willing to potentially absorb all of that, because since you've waived it, that would mean that you aren't going to be able to, you can, but it would mean that you've already agreed to move through. And if you default out of the transaction, you would potentially lose your deposit. But again, if you know you're going to buy this house, and you know you've got the resources to deal with whatever problems might come up, you could also waive your inspection contingency. I don't usually suggest doing this unless the seller has already provided inspections, because you never know what's going to happen, and particularly with older properties, and particularly if this is a house that has septic and a well. Those are things, if there's not very, very recent, like within the last few months, inspections on those two things, I don't suggest that, but we're talking about ways to get an edge here. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you're confident that you don't need to worry about various inspections, waive those. And make sure to note, if you've decided you'll waive a roof inspection, great. Note that the buyer will not be asking for a roof inspection, so that they know that that's something that you're not going to ask for. Now, there's something else that you can do. that's kind of interesting and presents challenges and is absolutely valid, but you need to do it smartly. And that's an escalation clause. I have used these in the past, but you need to absolutely be perfectly clear on what it means. First, you need to make sure in the escalation clause basically says that you as the buyer will pay X price for this home. But if the seller receives another offer that's higher than mine, I'm willing to increase my offer to Y price. So it gives you a way to walk into a transaction where you feel like your offer may not be high enough, where you can show that it's high, that you can go higher. It presents some interesting challenges. So, number one, what is the original offer of your purchase price? And that's going to be spelled out on page 1 of the contract if you're in California, where you stipulate what you're offering for the property. Now, how much will that price be escalated above any other competitive bid? So what you're going to say is, for any documented offer, my buyer will offer $5,000 more than that amount. Then the next number you need to spell out is the maximum amount that the purchase price can reach in case of multiple offers. So let's say someone has listed a house for $300,000. There's no question that house is going to sell for more. In fact, let's say the average in that neighborhood for a home with similar features is going for $400,000. Let's say that this house actually has some upgrades that make it worth more like $420,000. But let's also say that you as a buyer are sick and tired of shopping for a house. You've been looking for 4 months. You've made 10 offers. Every single one of them's been turned down. Your agent might have at this point suggested an escalation clause prior to this, and you turned it down because it sounded too nuts. So what you would do is come in with whatever your agreed upon purchase price is right up front. You'd write it like a normal contract. Maybe it's $300,000, maybe it's asking price, but you're convinced it's going to be multiple offers, and you're also convinced it's probably going to go closer to $420. So let's say maybe you just put $400 in there as your purchase price, and then you would say in the addendum, you'd have an escalation clause addendum. Where you say that you will pay X amount of dollars over the highest bid, up to a limit of whatever, $450,000, say. That could be a huge act of frustration on your part, simply. And I've had clients who are there. I've gotten offers from people who are just sick and tired of being outbid. It's important, though, to mention in this clause that the highest offer that the seller receives must be documented. So that means you can't just assume that the seller's agent and the sellers are telling you this is what the highest bid was. You need to see documentation on what the highest bid was. Am I implying that someone might tell a fib about what the highest offer was? Yeah, I am. And it's just smart, I think, for you to at least ask for some sort of verification of what the highest offer was. Now, other things to know about escalation clauses is make sure that you know that the seller is willing to entertain escalation clauses prior to submitting the offer. Some home sellers are going to state that they're not going to accept offers with an escalation clause. It doesn't make much sense for a seller not to do that. But oftentimes they want to try to keep this as uncomplicated as possible. I've actually had sellers say, we don't want to deal with this escalation clause crap, and say they just want it to go through and you come in with your highest and best offer and let that be it. Not necessarily a really bad strategy, because it tends to, in my experience, when you tend to say, give me your highest and best, this will be a multiple offer situation, you do end up getting that. You tend to get folks, in this particular scenario, that buyer might have just come in with $450,000 instead of a potential amount less than that. You should also only use an escalation clause when you know that there's going to be multiple offers, or when you know you're going to have to pay an escalated price for the property. So why not use this all the time? Because you're telegraphing to the seller and the listing agent what your max is. And that's going to invite a counter offer if you're the only one who makes an offer. If you have an escalation clause and you're the only one who makes an offer, I can almost guarantee you're going to get countered. Even if under normal circumstances, if there hadn't been an escalation clause, they might have just taken your offer as it was. You also want to pick the strategies that work best for the way that the seller is going to be entertaining offers. For instance, if you know there's going to be an extended period of time to review, let's say the listing says offers will be entertained at 5 p.m. on Thursday, and the seller will not be responding to any offers until Tuesday. Well, you know that there's going to be multiple offers because that you've discerned that. So you know that there's going to be plenty of time to review. It's not going to be whoever gets there first kind of a thing. You also want to make sure, as I said before, that your real estate agent is getting all the details possible, that you as the buyer are prepared for that situation. Now, two more things that I want to throw out there as things. One of them we've already kind of talked about. Make sure your offer's complete. This should be obvious, but I am stunned to this day at the number of offers that I receive that are incomplete. Well, how do you know if it's incomplete? You ask. Well, you ask. I know that in the listings that I present through the MLS, there's a section that is only visible to real estate agents. And so in that part, I will typically mention those kinds of things, the things that all of these things must be included with the offer. So let's say I know I'm going to have multiple offers on this property, and I want to create as streamlined a process as possible for my clients. As part of the process of putting that home on the market, we're going to go ahead and get an inspection. We're going to get a home inspection, a roof inspection, every inspection that needs to happen on that house. We're going to get done. So I'm going to present a PDF package, a digital package of all of those documents for the buyers to review. And I'm going to say, I want signed copies that you've received every single one of these documents. I want all these disclosures signed, and more power to you, because what I'm encouraging is for someone to come in with a no contingencies offer. And I'm giving them the circumstances under which a no contingencies offer would win. So, and I communicate that to anyone who asks me. So just make sure that you're submitting everything, and keep in mind, you may not know what everything is. Only your agent may have access to that. And still, despite the fact that I have included lists of everything that must be in an offer package in those comments aimed directly at buyers agents, I have received every single time I will get at least one offer from an agent that is not complete. Those folks my sellers don't even want to see those offers unless it's a ridiculously overpriced offer that has a very high probability of closing. It doesn't even merit review. So just make sure that's happening. Talk to your agent. Make sure your agent has called the listing agent. And there may even be listing agents that are so stupid they're not putting all the things they expect in the listing. So make sure you're calling and make sure you're understanding what everyone wants. And another thing to keep in mind is, let's say a whole bunch of disclosures are included in this package that's available, right? But nobody says it's required for you to submit that stuff signed. You should submit it signed. And if you're comfortable enough with what's being disclosed in the contract, you should waive off on any contingencies relating to the disclosures that are being given to you. That puts you in a better position. Now, finally, if you really want to make things good for a seller, and oftentimes this will really sway a seller, offer free occupancy in the home after close of escrow up to a month. Now, if you've ascertained ahead of time that this is already a stress point for the seller, anything from a week to 4 weeks is awesome. And if it's something you're comfortable and you can manage, you've because of the way you had to give notice to your current rental situation, you've already got an extra month where you're staying, where that's going to be available to you anyway. There's no reason to not do it. So anything you can do that really makes it clear that you're paying attention to what the needs of the seller are, and that you're willing to go that extra mile, those are things that are going to carry with them value. And in that value, you may find that an offer from you that might have been financially a little bit lower, but gives the seller a lot more flexibility to deal with the sale with less stress, could absolutely pay off for you in terms of you winning that bid over someone else. All right, folks, I hope this has been valuable information for you, or at least as valuable or more valuable than the time that you've spent listening to me review it. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.